Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. First, we're going to start with Kherson direction. Today the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation published the video of the results of the strike that took place a day ago. And as a result of that strike, as you can see, the Russians managed to destroy a very powerful ammo depot, very big ammo depot that was located in the vicinity of Kherson, in the vicinity of Chernobyevka. This is the settlement by the name of Kiselyovka. And I'll remind you that just a day ago, the Russians published the results, the video, the footage of the strike. There was a very big ammo depot, and after some explosions, very difficult to understand what kind of weapon, what type of weapon the Russians were using. Probably that was a missile strike, then there was a very heavy explosion, and after that there was a secondary detonation. And also there was a very big fire later, and as you can see, very big explosion. And one more time, today they published the results of that strike. Now we're moving further to Kherson direction. Today we got more details regarding the Russian attack and Russian strike with FAB-500 against industrial area in Kherson city. That was a very powerful. It is also an island along the Dnieper River, and the Ukrainians were using this industrial area for some kind of base, and they were planning to concentrate forces. That was something like an area that Ukrainians were using to supply and support their forces along the islands, along the Dnieper River. The Russians continue bombing and attacking the Ukrainians in the settlements like Beristov, Lvovo, Barkhunka. This morning, the Russians made another strike using FAB-500. As you can see, there were two explosions. That means that was obviously the Su-34 with the FAB-500. Now we're moving further to Orechov direction. Today, as you can see, we got a lot of geolocated videos, a lot of different updates from this territory. And the most important is that last evening, the Russian sources started publishing updates that Ukrainians launched a very powerful attack in direction of Yerbova after very long artillery preparation. This morning, we got updates that was something like speculation. There were no attacks in direction of Yerbova, but anyway, the Russians managed to summarize the situation in this area, to summarize the Ukrainian losses, and some Russian soldiers on the ground published a very long video with the results of Ukrainian attempts to attack in direction of Yerbova. Significant number of armored vehicles, Bradley, Strikers, tanks, T-64, T-72, Max Pro, and many other different types of weapons were destroyed during the just short movement, just for a very short distance. For example, just on this distance, for 5 kilometers, the Ukrainians lost up to 28 armored vehicles on this road. All of them were geolocated, different types, just 5 kilometers and 30 armored vehicles. And of course, the number of losses among manpower is unknown. Also, the Ukrainians continue attempts to concentrate their forces in Robotyne. Today, the Russian sources published the video how the Ukrainians were moving along the streets. They were moving along Robotyne itself. The Russians controlled the situation and they attacked them. The most important part of this video is that the Russian sources report that Robotyne was reduced to ruins, that there are nowhere to hide, that there is no settlement on the map, and so on. But if we take a look closer at this map, we see that there are still a lot of buildings, and every single building is located very far from each other, so which allows the Ukrainians to stretch their forces, to concentrate them. As you can see, another Ukrainian Bradley arrived in this area, and then the Bradley wasn't packed. Soldiers got their positions, and only after that the Russians started bombing. So I'm trying to say that the Ukrainians do have possibilities to concentrate their forces. Currently they don't have possibilities probably to concentrate their armored fists to continue offensive operation, but there is no problem with infantry in this area, obviously. Also, the Russians published the video how another Ukrainian armored vehicle that was trying to bring or to evacuate soldiers was destroyed on the way in direction of Robotyne. The Ukrainians also published the video how they managed to discover and to destroy the Russian tank and the Ukrainians are saying that that tank was destroyed with the usage of distance mining methods. So they mined the territory in front of tank, and when tank entered the territory, basically the tank was destroyed. The Russian sources also published some first statistics, not the first, but like final statistics, pre-final statistics of September. And according to information we have, for example, on the evening of the 26th of September, the Russians calculated around 1,000 like geolocated usage of FPV drones. And when talking just about September, the Russians used the FPV drones more than 450 times. It's like about geolocated. Of course, there are more, the number is bigger, of course, obviously, and we're talking about geolocated one. For example, in comparison with August, there were just 242 geolocated cases of usage of FPV drones. So we see that currently we see the period, and we can say that September was a period of time when the Russians managed to achieve and establish complete FPV drone superiority in comparison with the Ukrainian forces, with the Ukrainians. So there are no changes on the ground. The only thing that we should mention, obviously, is that Ukrainians took a decision to reinforce this territory after very heavy losses in this direction. After the Ukrainians lost a significant number of armored vehicles, the Ukrainians took a decision to redeploy the 1st Battalion of 1st Tank Brigade in this direction. So probably they will make more attempts to attack with reinforced, with like armored vehicles, with tanks, not just with Bradleys and Strikers, but with tanks that obviously probably have more chances to penetrate the Russians' defense belt and to get at least the settlements like Verbovo, or at least to enter the settlement. The Russians continue bombing and attacking the Ukrainian forces in Bakhmutovka. There were like a lot of videos from this territory during the previous night. There were like missile strikes, there were FAB bombs, there were FPV drones attacks. The Russians are doing the same thing as they did before. They trying to discover and to destroy the Ukrainian ammo depots, the positions of their forces. So we can say that preparation before storming of the settlement still continue. It's very difficult to understand how long the Russians are planning to do this, but one more time I'm telling you that I expect that sooner or later the Russians will launch their offensive operation in this direction. A few things about Andriivka. If you remember, yesterday we discussed the Ukrainian attempt to cross the railways, and the sources are saying, the Russians are saying, that at some points the Ukrainians managed to do this. Today we got more details about that battle for at least for the southern part of Andriivka. We see that how the Ukrainian tanks was trying and armored vehicles were trying to move to railways to attack the Russian positions, but they were covered by the Russian artillery strikes, and as a result of those strikes, a lot of tanks, a lot of armored vehicles were destroyed on the southern flank. Now we see like the explosion of one of the tanks that were moving in direction of Andriivka. The Ukrainians from their side tried to suppress the Russian positions, tried to destroy Russian artillery system, Russian mortar positions by suppressing them with FPV drones, but as we can see, this is not enough. FPV drones, of course, is good type of weapon, but it's good when you combine different types of weapon like FPV drones, artillery strikes, missile strikes, and cluster rounds. And if you are able to combine all these types of weapon, only then you can achieve some success. The Russians also reported that today, these days, the Russians, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation took a decision to redeploy 10,000 Wagners in direction of Bakhmut. And the purpose of this redeployment, first of all, is to reinforce the Russian positions, the Russians' defense line. And this is the first area, like to stabilize the area. And the second purpose is to launch a counter-offensive operation and to return back the settlements like Klishchievka, Andriivka, and probably even to move further. Or this is one point of view, and the second point of view is probably Wagners could be redeployed to the northern direction to help the Russian forces in this area to develop their progress in the vicinity of Orekhovo-Vasilivka, Minkovka, Privilya. We still haven't received even a single photo confirmation of Russian successful offensive operation in the direction of Orekhovo-Vasilivka, but we got video from the Ukrainian sources that Ukrainian tanks, like the small reconnaissance team, in 2 tanks with some unknown number of infantry was trying to attack or make reconnaissance in combat in direction of Zaliznyánska, but those tanks were stopped by the Russian counter anti-tank fire. So as we can see, at least this geolocated video confirms that there are no Russians in Orekho-Vasilivka. Maybe they managed to capture some strongholds and shelters in the vicinity of the settlement, but not the settlement itself. When talking about Kupyansk direction, as you can see, the situation in this area is getting hot. Every single day, the Russians published a series of number of videos of counter-artillery duels. As a result of those duels, a significant number of Ukrainian artillery systems were destroyed. There is still a stage of offensive operation when the Russians try to suppress the Ukrainian artillery to establish complete artillery superiority, and only after this phase they are able to continue their offensive operation. But also it's very difficult to understand when exactly the Russians are planning to do this, if they're planning to do this ever, because the Ukrainians managed to redeploy a lot of forces in this area to stabilize the front line. And also, if the Russians continue their offensive operation, obviously there are going to be a significant number of losses from the Russian side. The only interesting update that we also got from the local resources, from the local Telegram channels, is that previous days the Russians bombed Petropavlovka with FAB 500, and basically they managed to got the positions of 44th Brigade, and the Ukrainian sources are saying that significant number of wounded and killed soldiers of 44th Brigade from Petropavlovka arrived in Kupyansk in hospital, and this is like a lot of panic was about that case. But we haven't received nothing like geolocated videos, we haven't received even the video of our air bombing strike in this area, so it's very difficult to judge and to understand whether this piece of information was correct or not. And that's it for this short video. Military Summary channel reminds you, we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.